there's limited number of IPv4 resources in the first place, and nobody will create a new ones. Our mission is to address the challenge, not by, trying to invest in new technology, but instead helping to optimize, usability of the resources.
Welcome to the Fast Mode interview series taking place today at the ATx Singapore. With me today, I have Mindaugas Zilys, who is the head of sales at IPXO, leading B2B sales in the IP leasing and networking space. Well, that's a very, very interesting area, an area that, most of us would have taken for granted. We'd be thinking that IP addresses, okay, so we have those IP addresses, we have our domain names. Okay, what else is there in the picture? Now we are going to learn something really interesting. And Mindaugas here has more than 10 years of experience building high performance teams across global markets. He aligns people, processes, and data to drive consistent revenue growth. So, how do you feel about the event today?
Well, I would say it's not as crowded as I expected. On the other hand, we're coming second year in a row, and the hype that team brought from the last year event, made us even more, excited coming here. And we met some of our existing customers. It's nice meetings with different people, and our own customers, and of course discussing the industry trends with the community.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's dive into some of the questions that most people will have about this, the area, the solutions that you guys are providing. So let's start with IPv4 scarcity. Well, scarcity is no longer just a networking issue, but a business and infrastructure challenge. How is IPXO seeing demand for IPv4 resources evolve across cloud hosting, AI, and telecom sector today?
Well, you mentioned a good point. Well, the scarcity is number one word that comes in mind when you talk about IPv4, and it's been several years in a row. And companies started looking for alternatives. There's IPv6 team, there are other solutions what companies been implementing, but still what we see, everyone is still looking for additional IPv4 supply, especially with new industries pairing well with AI team. Even more IP resources are needed, especially in Asia.
Exactly.
Even though we operate globally, we see from the demand side, it would be number one region where a very different company starting with mid-size or smaller telcos, ISPs from Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam. They are expanding globally. We are adding millions of subscribers every year.
Wow.
So they need additional capacity here. And internet adaptation and is still growing.
It's still growing phenomenally.
And, definitely. I'm talking about the cloud solutions. Everything is moving to cloud these days.
Yes, exactly.
And adding the AI team on top, well, there is a huge demand for IP resources. And we, instead of, looking, we will not able to add new IP addresses in the market. Therefore, we started, looking for alternative solutions and try to understand what's happening with the current, addresses that do exist. And what we found out that actually there are like 15-20% unused. So they are laying down among large enterprises all over the world that's got some resources when internet just started 20-30 years ago. And some of those companies don't even know that they have these
are not even aware that they are sitting on those.
Exactly. So we help them to understand, first of all, auditing their records that they do have, and, show them that there is a possibility to create a new revenue stream for the companies. And on the other hand, or simultaneously, we'll help a growing business, new industries, to get resources easier, faster, and, more sustainable way to operate.
Wow, that's really interesting, right? When you talk about, how they would have bought these IP addresses and they are in their vaults, but they don't know the value that they are sitting on until, you guys basically bring this information to them and see how you can repurpose that, for, some monetization there. And at the same time, like you rightly pointed out, there's so many companies, growing companies out there who need this service, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, let's move on to the other question. What are the key advantages of leasing IPv4 resources instead of going out and buying them outright, particularly in terms of, providing the flexibility, scalability, and financial efficiency?
That's very good questions. We often face companies. But leasing is still a new trend in the market, even though we as IPXO operate with 5 years, in the industry, we still hear from many companies that they are not aware that leasing option exists. And on the other hand, then they find out what are the real advantages. First of all, if you want to buy IP addresses, you need, 5-6 digit investment upfront. And, and it takes time. Yeah, from several months up to, half a year if you're moving resources from one region to another. And, if you're a growing business, you have customers waiting for additional resources right now. Why to wait, for 6 months? You're losing market, you're losing business. So that's actually one of the advantages. Speed, you can get IP resources faster, at time that you need. And the scalability, when we talk about, it's not only, to grow your capacity, but, market situation changing, your approach can change. And that's why, if you need to scale down, that's also an option if you are, talking about leasing, if you are doing that. Of course, CapEx versus OpEx is one of the main advantages. So not investing upfront. Second, you're never sure what will happen in the secondary market if one day you will decide to sell your resources. So that's why, leasing comes as a very good solution for this kind of.
Yeah, it gives people option, right? When they want to scale gradually instead of going out and what you pointed out, they don't have to invest upfront. And that's a big deal for businesses that are growing. You have to cap your costs as well. So leasing basically provides them an easy way to just go with the flow and see, whether, they can then maybe one day buy it when they can afford that.
And, one example that I like to use to compare it is same as with car leasing. When you lease a car, you don't need to care about tire changes, oil changes, and everything. Same goes with IP address. If you buy, a reputation management, ROA, RPKI, it comes, it's your responsibility. If you decide to lease address everything, we take care of it with our automated platform, that we built,
Awesome. Okay. So, the IPXO has emphasized automation, right, across the entire leasing lifecycle. So how important is automation in making IPv4 resource management more scalable and operationally efficient for customers?
It's very important. The goal when we started, to create the platform, the first idea was not only to put, the resources in one place and, to not just a leasing platform, but the automated management solution was our top priority. Because, it's two things that would be the most important. Primarily, speed, fast provisioning. When you lease IP addresses, being automated, we automatically issue ROA, RPKA. You are ready to use your resources within 10 to 15 minutes. So we don't need to wait, don't need to involve any paperwork in that. Everything is taken care of you automatically. Another idea for automation is, to help companies to save their resources. You don't need to invest in building your in-house development team. Instead, you can rely on our solution primarily, for example, for taking care of abuse management. That's very important topic for cloud companies, for telco companies. You don't need to have 5 network engineers that just constantly monitoring if any of IP addresses is being used on 100 different block lists. Instead, we created automated a reputation management solution that scans 80 plus different block lists, and if anything starts happening with your IP addresses, you get message automatically from us, and you can start taking care of the issue instead of trying to figure out what's happening.
And I guess, that's really important because management of your IP addresses shouldn't be your business, your main functionality. It should be given to the specialists who can do this. And they, like you said, through automation, you get the alerts and then you can just act when there is an issue instead of,
Exactly. It's just a raw material. Well, you can concentrate building your product, what it actually makes money, and let us to, take care of
exactly.
the source.
Exactly. Okay. So, the other thing, of course, I think we touched a little bit about this is the security and trust part, yeah? In terms of, we just talked about alerting and all that. So these are important, of course, in the age of internet and internet infrastructure. So how do technologies like RPKI and automated ROA management strengthen confidence in the IP4 leasing ecosystem?
Well, the trust and the security team is, I would say, it's the first question what we get, especially from industries like telco that are, using IP addresses for many years. It's a primary resource for them to do their business, and they are used to buy, So how come right now, instead of buying, they to trust someone when IP resources coming, from third party and, from the company that's, just coming into the market. So that's very important topic. And that's why, it comes together with our automated solution. So we created automated, when you start leasing from us, ROA or PKI is being issued automatically. And then you are sure that then you have everything, confirmed. You're sure that your address will not be hijacked, routed as the way it's, it should be.
Yes.
And, all the period then you are leasing, you are sure that the address, belongs to you. All the companies see that you are the user of the address. You are the kind of owner of the address in the lease period, and it's all the records automatically being updated that it's true.
And ensuring nobody hijacks that.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. So and that's gives you same kind of rights as you would have as you would be buying IP addresses, but adds additional flexibility on top.
Yes, exactly. So they get all the benefits of being like almost an owner, because the entire thing is managed by you guys, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So, moving on to today's event, the sessions have just started, and I think we see a lot more conversations focusing on digital resilience, they call it, and also sustainable infrastructure growth, because people have invested a lot, and then they want to make sure that it's sustainable in the long run. Where do you see IP4 leasing fitting into the broader future in internet infrastructure in Asia?
Well, we are coming back, to where we started. There's limited number of IPv4 resources in the first place, and nobody will create a new ones. So that's our mission is to address the challenge, not by, trying to invest in new technology, but instead helping to optimize, usability of the resources. So first of all, helping the companies to discover the resources that they might have and might not be using or might not be using efficiently in the first place. And then help, growing business to access these resources easy and faster way. And that's how we make sure that, that, as I said, 15 to 20% of IP addresses are still not being used, even though there are many companies that are...
I'm still really shocked with that
are
figure.
waiting in line at, at the registries, For example, in AppNIC, if you would like to get a new IP block, it would take from 6 to 12 months, and you still could have very little amount of the addresses available. So it might be an option for some businesses, but if you have a possibility to grow fast, to grow right now, it's not the best solution. So regulation that comes into place. There are different regulations when we talk about IP addresses, worldwide. And on the one hand, the ethnic region it has most stricter policy in terms of the leasing IP addresses. Even though companies had the possibility to lease, on the other hand, the companies that have unused resources are currently not allowed to monetize. So current regulations actually in this region makes it more difficult, to access and to make this process sustainable. So one of our goals is not only, to help companies to make money, but we're trying to address the broader issue, for example, that many governments in the region are pushing for IPv6 adaptation. And on the other hand, they do not allow the companies that free up IPv4 resources, to put them on the secondary market. So basically, they just staying on the on the Excel sheet instead of putting them on the balance sheet and creating some new revenue.
I like that, just leaving them on the Excel sheet instead of that's just revenue waiting to be collected, and then you can't do anything about it. It's stagnant there, and it's not bringing anything to anyone, right? Especially I think from this conversation, what I understand a lot is that there will be so many enterprises struggling for the IP addresses, and don't know that there are so many options for them to get hold of this, especially for those growing very fast, and they can't afford the timelines. So they say 6 to 12 months just waiting for these IP addresses to be approved. And at the same time, waiting for the maturity of IPv6, that's another thing altogether. That's not just happening. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be really a long time before, that's realized. So what do you do in between?
Exactly. Even though, there are some countries in this region that leading worldwide in IPv6 adaptation. On the other hand, we see that it's for last 10 years, the rate of IPv6 adaptation is actually, it's not that it's not increasing, but it's in some ways it's kind of decreasing worldwide. So yeah, it looks like even though there is trend, but there are still lots of things to learn that all the companies could adapt.
Yeah. And on to our last question. I think, IPXO often, you guys often talk about improving utilization of existing internet resources rather than simply extending supply. So how important is ecosystem collaboration in building a more sustainable and accessible IP resource market globally?
It's super important. At IPXO, we currently have over 1,600 different networks connected worldwide. We have over 14 million IP addresses on our platform and over 2,000 customer base. So it's not only telcos, cloud providers, or AI companies that come, but we actually connecting very different companies that work together in the industry, for their operations. So collaboration is a primary goal, for us to bring everyone together. It's not talking, that we connect IP holders, so large enterprises, large telcos that have unused resources with the growing companies, but also, the hyperscalers, AWS, Google, Microsoft. It's very important that they would also allow companies to bring their, IP resources, for example, to the ecosystem. So, for example, we created, last year, we created automated integration with AWS. So, for example, right now, companies that, would like, still using AWS services, they can bring their own IPs that, for example, start leasing from us automatically to the system. So basically, we help companies, our goal is to make, the ecosystem smoother by helping companies, to collaborate, to partner with each other. It's not only, and we kind of only the place, but to help companies to meet, their potential partners.
Yeah, you become the center point for buyers and sellers to come together, and like what you pointed out, the hyperscalers as well, and the government and the regulatory process as well. Yeah, to bring them together to make sure we optimize these addresses that we have. And because basically that drives value, you're creating value in the market in a big way. So excellent job. So with that, I think Mindaugas, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing these insights. I'm sure that this is a very interesting topic, and a lot of enterprises, the fast-growing ones, would definitely need the solution to scale their operations quickly in the shortest time possible.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So it was lovely morning, so talking to you.
And all the best for IPXO in your endeavors.
Yeah, thank you very much.